Hi, I'm Kathy and you are at my home. We are doing our third episode of At Home with Cathy, an absolutely fabulous project using Annie Sloan paint, where we are working on 6 rooms and 6 styles with 3 critters. And they're in the shots and they're part of the plan. So today we're in the living room. And if you saw our preview, we took you through the living room last fall. We've since painted it in this beautiful Bear paint called Honey Infusion. It's added a lot of light to the room. It's a soft yellow. It makes a great palette as a background palette for all of the colors we want to use with our Annie Sloan paints. The style we've chosen for the living room started with these chairs. They have all the colors in them that I love. They have a rusty red, they have greens, they have blues, the cream is a neutral background. There's a richness to these colors and a warmth, and as you can see, they play off very nicely against the pale yellow. So this is where we've taken the palette for these rooms, and it's part of our modern, for this room, the living room, it's part of the modern contemporary style. So we're using the color recipes for painted furniture. There are 40 step-by-step projects in here. There are 5 style themes. Modern Contemporary is the one for the living room, which ties nicely into the Swedish for the dining room and the country for the kitchen. And it's important to do that because those rooms all flow one into the other. Now, I've taken a little bit of liberty. I can't always use the recipe from one style in the room that's appropriate because I don't always have stairs, for instance, or the right furniture to paint. So sometimes what I've done is borrowed a style, a painting technique or a texture from one of the styles, but I'm using the colors that relate to the theme we're doing. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to paint this fire surround. You can see it's very simple. It's a plain white painted with a little bit of trim on it to give it a little bit of texture. And the brick was painted black when we bought the house. We put in an electric insert and just kept it kind of flat, but you can see that we're working with a blue-green tile. Ties into the little bit of green that's on the lamps. So we thought, why not paint the surround in a little bit of that blue-green? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a technique that Annie really enjoys. It's called frottage, and it's a layering of paint to create texture. I think it's going to work pretty well on this fireplace. I kind of did a little storyboard. Sometimes when you're working with existing colors, you have to kind of guess what they might be like when you finish using them. And you put a dark wax, and there goes the dog again. She's excited. So I'm starting here with an Aubusson blue. And in preparation, I've poured a little bit of paint out of each can. When I'm working on a project, particularly since we heat with wood, everything is very dry in this house, and the paint dries out really quickly. So I work with small amounts of paint that I've poured into little bowls, and then to have them ready for our project today, I've just covered them with plastic. But before I did that, while I was playing here, I did some layering of paint just to see what colors I was going to come out with, because I'm trying to come out with something that kind of mimics the tile here. So what I'm using is an Aubusson blue. Right here, I've got an Aubusson blue. That's going to be my back color. The next color I'm going to use is a Chateau Gray, and that's a green gray. So that's going to kind of mimic, there's a green in here. I was playing with an Antibes green, but it ended up being a little bit too bright, too green, and it didn't quite work. My next color is Provence, which is a blue, and there's definitely a blue in this tile, and I'm going to end with a little bit of old white. So what I've done too is I have painted sticks here to give you a better idea of what this looks like as we put it together. So Aubusson blue, oh, my country gray is downstairs, my Provence, and my old white, which is old white. I also, for each room, have created a storyboard so that I can remember what colors and the projects that I'm going to work on. So the mantle is today, and we'll start connecting dots as we work with these colors to find out if they're actually going to do what I think they're going to do. The last thing we're going to do is dark wax them, And I may actually use a little bit of clear wax and a little bit of dark wax because I may not want it to be quite as dark as it turned out on my storyboard. Let's play. So what I need for this project is paint, a brush, and crinkled up paper. So we took big sheets of paper. Zoe thinks that anytime you put anything into a ball, it may be for her. You crinkle it up once, open it up, and crinkle it up again. And what you're trying to do is create a lot of little lines. And those little lines are what's going to give you the texture from your paint. So let's get started. So we're going to start with a base coat of Obasan Blue. I dip my brush in the water, just get it a little bit wet, dab it off. And again, I'm working with small quantities of the paint so that it doesn't dry out. And when you're doing this technique, you work in small sections. You work in the section that's about the same size as your paper. So I'm just going to push it on here, smush it in. I want a pretty good coat for my base coat because I'm going to take it back with the paper. And you can see that I went along and we put our painter's tape on the whole thing to protect the newly painted wall paint and to keep it off the bricks. Whoops. And I'll end up with some on the hairdryer. And it does dry out quickly, so I don't want to go with a very large section before I do my next part. The technique that actually makes this frottage. So that's good. Let's start with that. So I'm going to take my piece of paper and I'm going to press it in to the paint. Now once I've pressed it in, I want to take my hands and smooth it right in. Follow all the lines, press that paper in there, transferring the crinkles of the paper to the paint. Smooth it all out. Now, you can see, I don't know if you can get that, Sean, or not. That's a no-no. That's where my fingers are. I don't want that, so I'm going to go back and press it. I don't want to see fingerprints. I want it to be not a smudge. A smooth line. This one's a little bit trickier than it would be to do a flat surface because I have the trim detail here. Just take your time. You can always go back over and paint it again. Pull it off. See where you're missing. Okay, see my fingerprints there? Back and give that a bit of a rub. Go back here where it's missing a little bit. And then just stand back, peel it away, look at it, rub it again. That's not too bad. I don't mind having it a little bit more paint in the corners. That would kind of be a natural place to have a little bit more. Crazy about that little. Okay, so now we're going to go down and we're going to do another section. I'm going to go all the way down here and do the floor. Or not do the floor, all the way to the floor. But I'm going to work in sections so that I keep working with a wet edge, they call it. Overlapping a little bit where I've worked before, I worked the paint. Now we'll go in here and get inside. Do the same thing. And I can use the same paper over again several times until it gets so saturated with paint that I'm not getting the impression that I need anymore. And I just ball it up and start with a fresh one. And hope that my painting buddy here doesn't take the ball of paper and run away with it. Get paint all over the house. Just peel it off and have a look. I got too much paint, whoops, right there. You're not looking for a perfect finish here, so it's kind of the ideal thing if the piece that you're painting is imperfect, if it has lots of scratches or dings in it. So to speed this up a little bit, just to make sure it's dry before I put my next color on, I use my hairdryer. I use it on a low setting. I don't mind if it crackles a little bit, which is what can happen if I use it at a high setting, because the paint surface dries on top faster than the underneath layers of paint, so I can get a crackle finish, but that's okay for this finish. It would give me simply more texture. But you can see now it looks like I've got old wood, or old painted wood starting to come up. So my next color is Chateau Gray. I'm going to do exactly the same thing, except I'm going to add just a little bit of water to this layer. And the reason is I want this paint to be a little bit looser. I want it to be not as thick a coat. I don't need to cover as much. Just going to scrape a little bit back and do exactly the same thing. Go up in here, try and get everywhere I was blue before. I don't have to cover exactly the same because I want a little bit of the blue to show through, so it doesn't matter if I have some spots that are darker in the blue. Okay, and again, don't go too far before getting your paper. Do the same thing. Back over, rub it in. I think the most important thing with this is not to let the paper like do that. I don't want it to do that. And I'll check that, because if it's a big smoosh, I would pull it off, paint it again, and see what my effect was. I just go gently with it. I don't want to tear the paper either. Okay, I got a little bit of green in the corners there. So you can see I've got a hint of the blue coming through, but I've got a lot of green. And this green in particular has a lot of gray, which is good because I want this to be a little bit muted. You can see what's going to happen is I'm echoing the blue and the green that's in my chair. So I've got a blue, and it's a grayed blue, and now I've got this greeny blue that's going to come in here. I'm never going to get it identical. When you put paint on the wall and you put paint on the fabric, those two things take paint differently. So you're never going to have an identical match just because of the way the paint absorbs. So I'm going to continue down here now. I'm going to finish the Chateau Gray, and then we're going to do another layer. Okay, so we've just done our third layer, and we've used Provence, which is a bluey green right here. And again, I did add a little bit of water to make it a little bit looser. And I may have made this a little bit bluer than I wanted, but I can still see a green coming through. I'm trying to match my tiles, but not again perfectly because this is ceramic, so it's not going to be exactly the same as my painted look. But I've come pretty close. I've got a hint of green, I've got a lighter color in the blue, and then I've got a darker blue in the background. And so we're going to dry this now, then we're going to put a dark wax on it, and we're going to see what we get. So I have my 3 layers of paint on here, my Aubusson blue, my country gray, Chateau Gray, sorry, and then my Provence. And I was going to do old white, but I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to put on a coat of white. I don't think I'm going to need it. I have enough white coming through. On the painted surround of this fireplace, there were all kinds of drips and nicks. It's an old fireplace surround that are now coming through, and now they're kind of interesting. So I think I'm going to have enough of a light color coming through that I'm not going to need my old white. But I am going to use a dark wax. Put that on here. It kind of gives it like an aged look. I'm using a rag just because I want to just play with this a little bit. I don't want it to go right into all of the crevices. If I used a brush, it would go right into all of the crevices, and that's not necessarily where I want this dark wax. So I'm just putting on a coat here. And then I'm going to buff it out and see what I get. And at that point, if I like the finish, I'll go ahead and finish it, do the whole thing, and when you come back, it'll all be done. So let's just put that on there. Let's just buff that out a little bit. a cleaner cloth here, and I'm just taking back some of that dark wax. Dark wax is a stainer, so it's going to stain the color just a little bit darker than what I have here, and you can see that in the difference. If I don't like that finish and I want to take a little bit of that dark wax off, I'll get my clear wax and I'll put that on and remove a little bit of the dark to give myself a little bit cleaner look. Cleaner and clearer. Don't mind that dark in there though, because it kind of picks up on the dark of the fire surround too. All right. The wax is also going to protect the paint so that, because of course chalk paint is porous, and if I were to spill something or splash something against this, I'd want to be able to wipe it off. And the wax gives it a protective finish. And it also makes it smooth. And the more I buff it, especially when I'll probably put a second coat of clear on this just to give it a nice shine. I'm going to get a nice shine when I finish this. So there we go. Now I'm going to stand back and have a look at that. And I think I like that. So we're going to leave it there. I'm going to finish this. When you come back, you'll see the completed surround, and that'll also give me a little bit of time to decide exactly how I'm going to finish this, if I'm going to do the same thing or make the mantle stand out a little bit. I kind of wanted to do this part first and then decide on this. So let's move on. So this is something a lot of people have in their living room or in any room in your house. Lamps that you don't like. Now I got these lamps on Kijiji. I didn't pay very much for them. Then I found these beautiful lampshades. These lamps didn't come with lampshades. The lampshades gave me the inspiration for painting the lamp base. So what I've got is a burgundy background with some gold thread, and they're a little bit funky, so they kind of fit that modern contemporary look that I was going for. And they're okay on this lamp. They're not horrible, but I think they could be a little better, and I think they could give me a new look. So what I'm going to do is take Annie Sloan's burgundy and Arles, which is a gold and a burgundy, just like it sounds, and I'm going to reverse them a little bit. I'm going to try painting a burgundy on the leaf detail and all over the whole lamp, just to give myself a base, and on the finial. Then I'm going to take the Arles and paint over it, and we're going to find out what happens. And apparently Sawyer is going to help me. You're not going to go in there, kitty. Come on. Down you get. Good kitty. I'm going to start. Again, because I find we heat with wood, our house is dry, the paint dries out really quickly. I've put some paint in a bowl so that I'm starting just with a controllable amount and it's not going to dry out. And I'm just going to start with the finial. And I didn't even take it off. I just unscrewed it a little bit, and I'm just going to, I can hold it by the base while I go. Now burgundy looks really pink. And I'm going to make sure I get in right into all those little leaves on that finial. Until it dries, it's a very pink look. I want to get right into all those lines, and actually leaving it on here is the easiest way to do that. Go all the way around again. And then I'll just go back and touch up where my fingers. Keep a cloth handy, and if you actually get it on the lamp, just wipe it off. Paint's very easy to get off until it dries. So then I'm just going to start at the top here, and I'm going to paint all the way around, getting right in there. I'm using the round brush. It gives me a little bit of texture, but it also, those fine bristles, they help me get all the way in. I really like this paint because you don't have to do a whole lot of prep. I did wash this lamp very thoroughly, because you do handle lamps and your finger oils might be on them, or there could be dust, and that'll get picked up by the paint. But other than that, there's not a lot of prep. And this is not a metal lamp. This is made of resin. And you can see that it's shiny. That makes no difference. I'm just going to paint all the way around. I'm going to go right in there and get right into all those leaves. I'm going to move my lampshade because I do have a habit of flicking. And I might end up flicking paint on there. Not that you might see it on there, but go all the way around. And truly, it doesn't take very long to paint this. I've painted the whole lamp in the burgundy, and you can see this lamp has a lot of little lines and nooks and crannies. If I start to paint another coat of paint over that and I haven't thoroughly dried the paint in those little nooks and crannies, what's going to happen is the fresh paint's going to pull the old paint off, and I'm going to go back to whatever my original base was. So I am giving it a really good dry with the hairdryer just to make sure that I have it absolutely dry. Probably what I would do if we weren't shooting a video is I would paint this, go have a coffee, maybe a cookie, and come back. And then it would be good and dry. And I would leave a fan on it most of the time to get it really good and dry. So I'm just going to finish this off just a little bit. I can just see it. And with Annie's paint, you can tell because it's shiny when it's wet. So when the shine's all gone, the paint is dry. All right, pretty good. So now I'm just going to hold my lampshade up. That's a pretty nice color match. And I sort of want these lamps to stand out against the wall because the wall's so pale it can take some color. And this is modern contemporary. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to mimic a little bit of the gold embroidery that's here. And I have a leaf detail. So I'm going to use a finer brush. I'm not going to use one of the normal chalk painting brushes. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this in here. Just to get that gold. Just gives me a little bit more control then, because I want to stay within the lines. Don't mind if I have a little bit of the burgundy coming through. And when this is all done, I will take a little bit of the gilding wax in the gold and I'll go over all the edges. When we finish this, when it's completely dry and we finish this, I'm going to go all the way around, just kind of pivot it on the base. If you make a mistake and you get a little bit of the, I'm using the Arles, it's a yellow, a golden yellow. If I get a little bit of this on the burgundy, rather than wipe it off, I would probably just take my burgundy and touch it up, cover it over, because the burgundy will cover the yellow more than the yellow will cover the burgundy. Just going to go all the way around, just to give it a little band of color in the middle. But much like the stitches on the embroidery, you do see a little bit of the burgundy through that, so I don't want it completely saturated. I don't think. The nice thing about this paint is sometimes you do it, then you stand back and you think, oh, needs a little more. If you completely dislike it when you're done and it doesn't do anything for you at all, just get your paint out and paint it over. Start again. New project. So we're going to do the same thing with the finial because it has the same little bit of little tiny band of leaves on it. And I'm just using a very fine, this is a watercolor brush because these are water-based paints, so a watercolor brush works really well. Holds the paint, not too much, but just holds it. I love doing the finial right on the stand because I can just spin it. It's like it was made to do this. There. So now this is going to dry completely. Then I'm going to give it a good clear wax. I might actually sand this a little bit. There are sanding pads made especially for chalk paint. There's another wonderful Annie invention because you can use them wet or dry. They come in 3 different, there's the medium, and they say right on the back, fine and coarse. Now, I might want to take my fine, which is this one, and I might just want to go along the edges here. Just bring back a touch of the metallic. I'm just going to try it and see if I like it. And then I think what I'll do is go over that with a little bit of the gold, but I'm just bringing it up. You know what? I don't like it, so I'm probably going to paint right back over that and go with my original thought, which was to use a little bit of the gilding, make it gold, because the lamp I started with was a silver. So let's go back and look at this. I think what I will do, though, is just take a little bit off of here as I'm done. I like the way the finial looks. And something to think about. When you're painting a lamp or a piece of furniture, you're not standing this close looking to it. You're normally back more where Sean is looking at something. So your perspective is important when you're looking at something. If you look at it up close, you'll see where you got paint maybe a little bit that you didn't want to. You can wipe that off or paint over it. But don't sweat all that little stuff. This is creative paint. It's not meant to be perfect. The pleasure in the paint is in the imperfections. So we're going to let that dry. We're going to wax it, put the shade back on it, and when you come back next time, you'll see the finished lamp. So the other thing we're going to leave you with today is how to prep your furniture for painting. This is a piece we found on Kijiji. Again, love Kijiji. So many great pieces, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. Is it a desk? Is it a bookcase? It has bookcases on the end, but you have to have pretty skinny knees to sit in here. We're going to use it as a bookcase / desk in this living room, and we're going to paint it. But we have to wash it first. And I know this sounds really basic, but if you don't wash it first, your paint is going to pick up the dust. You're not sure what, especially a piece that you've purchased from somewhere and you don't know where it's been stored or what's been put on it. You really have to take your minute and do your prep. If it had any big scratches in it, this one's not too bad. It's got a few. I would sand them smooth or put a filler in it if it was a really deep scratch, and sand it off smooth again. If there was any varnish peeling on it, if it was super shiny varnish, I might even take just a very fine paper and just a fine grit, like a 220, something really fine, and just go over the whole thing and just get rid of that shine. You don't have to, but your paint will adhere a little better. So once you've done all that, and the reason you do all that first is you don't want to wash it twice. So look at the piece, make sure it doesn't have any peeling. Pieces are most likely to peel if they've been stored outside in an unheated garage or up in your attic where it might not be heated as much, and you bring them downstairs into the heat and the wood shrinks. When the wood shrinks, the finish on it is left the same and cracks because the wood is shrinking underneath it. So if you bring a piece in from outside or upstairs or in the basement or wherever it might be a little damper than your normal house where you intend on using it, let it sit for a few days. Let it dry out, or the opposite, absorb humidity if it's been somewhere super dry. But don't just bring it in from somewhere and start painting because you might not be happy with it. But the washing part is super easy. Hot water, a cloth, and Dawn or Sunlight dish detergent. These are your grease lifting detergents, and you just a little squirt in there. Normally I would have a bowl that was about as full as sink, and I just smush it around. Then I'm going to go over the whole thing, and I just start at the top and work my way down, and I am washing it all. If I think it's really dirty, if this was a table maybe that was used in the kitchen, I would do it again. If I've used really soapy water because it was very, very greasy, I would rinse it. So I'm not using a lot of detergent. Let's put this over here. So I'm probably fine. And this piece has a few gouges in it, but for my purposes, that's just going to add character. And there's actually writing here too. Godfrey. I think somebody signed their name through a piece of paper. So you're just going to go down the whole thing. This one has all kinds of little nooks and crannies for dust to collect in. One of the easiest ways to do it is feed the cloth through and just go all the way down. So take the time to do that. Go over the pieces. Oh, this is a good opportunity. There's a little repair job that needs to be done there, so I'll glue that before I get ready to paint. That's the other thing that caring for your piece and cleaning it does, is it tells you what might need to be repaired. So just go over the whole thing. We really recommend you do this the day before you want to paint. Go over it really well, let it dry, and it's all ready for you to paint the next day. In the next show, we're going back to the kitchen and we're going to see the cabinets in their finished painted glory. And a little spoiler alert here, I didn't like the color once we hung the cabinet up. It was too similar to the wall color, didn't have enough contrast, so we painted it all in a color, very same tone, but different color, and you're gonna love it. You're gonna see the finished cabinets, and we're going to start work on the backsplash. The backsplash is 4-inch tile, which we are going to paint in our country colors. So I've got my little storyboard going here. It'll be edited next time you see it, and these are some of the colors we're working with in the country style of Annie Sloan chalk paint. See you next week.